I never imagined I'd be seated next to the caterer's son at my own brother's wedding. Not as a last-minute fill-in, not as a plus one, not even as a guest of the groom. I am his sister. His only sister. Yet, somehow, someone thought it was appropriatino, acceptable to place me, in my emerald green silk gown, next to trays of lukewarm hors d'oeuvres and disposable napkins. While guests toasted with Dom Perignon in the grand ballroom, I sat in the kitchen, next to a clanging ice machine and the sharp smell of shrimp cocktail. That moment didn't just sting, it split something inside me. It pulled open a wound I'd spent years pretending had healed. But beneath the smile I always wore, the family dinners I never missed, and the holidays where I brought the best gifts and got none, there was a truth I'd always known. They never saw me as one of them. Not really. Not ever. The shame that crept into my chest that day was suffocating. But that shame didn't stay shame for long. It turned into something colder. Sharper. I left that kitchen in silence and came back with a legal folder. Because the one thing they all conveniently forgot. I built that wedding venue. Not with my hands, but with my company's money, labor, and network. And I held the contract. The contract with a termination clause. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you everything. From the beginning. Growing up, I always knew I was the accident. My parents had my brothers, two of them, Michael and Josh, years before me. Then, after what they used to joke was a wild anniversary in Cancun, I came along. The afterthought. The oops baby. Dad was a logistics manager who worked overtime most weekends. Mom stayed at home. But when I was about 8, she took up event planning, small weddings, baby showers, sometimes church fundraisers. She used to say it gave her a sense of purpose. What she didn't say was that the money kept our house afloat after Dad's gambling problems started draining their savings. My brothers had each other. 2 peas in a pod. Michael was the golden boy varsity football class president, followed Dad's footsteps into operations. Josh, the quiet one, adored by everyone for being the nice guy. I was the tag-along. The girl with curly hair and scraped knees, always trying to be heard over their louder, prouder voices. I wasn't the favorite, not even close. I remember my 16th birthday vividly because they forgot it, not just a missed cake or a delayed card. No, they actually forgot. We were at Josh's lacrosse championship, and when I brought it up, Mom said, "Oh, sweetheart, we'll do something next weekend." We never did. But I learned early. Don't expect things. Build your own. That became my mantra. By the time I turned 25, I had built a boutique event planning firm starting with one client, a borrowed van, and pure determination. Within 5 years, it had grown into a top-tier service used by corporate giants and celebrity weddings. My family barely noticed. They mentioned my company in passing, mostly when it benefited them. Like when Michael proposed to his girlfriend, Ellie, and Mom said, "You should ask your sister to help. Might even give you a family discount." End of 2. But that's not what hurt the most. What hurt was the tone. As if I was the help. Not the founder, not the CEO, just the girl with access to linens and lights. Still, I agreed to help. Because, despite everything, I wanted to be part of something with them. I thought maybe, just maybe, this time they'd see me. But what I didn't know then was that helping them would lead me straight to that kitchen chair, and to the decision that would finally set me free. Would you have done it? Would you have pulled the contract on your brother's wedding? Let me take you deeper into the story so you can decide for yourself. It all started 6 months before the wedding, on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, when Michael called me out of the blue. We weren't particularly close. His calls were usually more about business than family, but I answered anyway, always hoping, foolishly, that maybe this time it'd be different. "Hey, he said, his voice brisk. "Got a favor to ask. Ellie and I have started planning the wedding, you know, looking at venues and stuff." I remember wiping my hands on my desk blotter, setting my phone on speaker. "Oh, that's great. When's the big day?" "November," he said. "And Mom had this idea. She thought maybe we could use one of your venues. Something small, tasteful. You'd still make your margin, of course. I sat up straighter, trying to contain my flicker of excitement. Not because I wanted their money, I didn't, but because the gesture felt like an olive branch. Of course, I said. We've got that new estate just outside of town. Lakeside, high ceilings, outdoor garden. It'd be beautiful that time of year. Perfect, he replied. Could you hold it for us? We're still deciding on the guest list, but we'll want the full weekend package. Done, I said, smiling. And thanks for asking, Mike. I'm really glad to be a part of it. There was a pause. Then, a clipped. Yeah, sure, appreciate it. In the weeks that followed, I assigned our best coordinator to handle logistics, personally walked through the site with Ellie, who barely looked up from her phone during the Turins signed off on discounted rates. I wasn't just providing a venue. I was giving them everything. The florals, the lighting, the rehearsal dinner setup. My company, Everglow Events, would handle every detail, top to bottom. I even waived most of our labor fees. My assistant asked if I was sure, and I said yes. Because it was family. Because I wanted to belong. But I began to notice something strange. While I was heavily involved in the logistics, I wasn't looped into any of the family planning conversations. The group chats would light up with photos of tuxedo options, centerpiece samples, or Ellie's bridal shower updates, and I was either left out entirely or added as an afterthought. Oops, forgot to include you, Josh texted once. You good with this setup? The photo showed a table diagram with all our cousins at the front and a tiny circle labeled EM shoved behind the service doors. I responded, "What's EM?" Josh wrote, "Emily Morganu, dummy." I stared at the screen. I typed back, "Why am I behind the service doors?" No answer. 2 days later, I brought it up with Mom when we were picking linens. "Oh, sweetheart," she said, flicking through swatches, "don't be so sensitive. The front tables are for the bridal party and close friends. You'll still be close to the action." "I'm his sister," I reminded her. "Yes, but you're not in the wedding party," she said, voice light, dismissive. "You're helping run things. You'll want to be near the coordinator, anyway." That word "run thing" shit me in the chest. Like I was staff. Like I wasn't family. I tried brushing it off. Maybe they were overwhelmed. Maybe it wasn't intentional, but it kept happening. I offered to contribute something personal like a slideshow of childhood photos for the reception. Ellie shut that down fast. "We're keeping it modern. No cheesy nostalgia, please." When I suggested a family toast at the rehearsal dinner, Michael said, "Let's not overcomplicate things." The rehearsal dinner came. I stood to the side while they toasted each other. Not once did anyone mention me, or Everglow, or what I had done to make their perfect evening happen. I poured my own glass of wine and watched from the shadows. Then came the day of the wedding. I arrived early to do a final walkthrough, clipboard in hand, headset on. The venue looked stunning. My team had outdone themselves. Crystal chandeliers, fresh peonies, a string quartet playing under the twinkle lights. I changed into my gown, touched up my makeup, and waited for the ceremony to begin. That's when I noticed the seating chart. It was on a gold easel, hand calligraphed. I skimmed down the list, looking for my name. Table 9. Not near the stage, not near the dance floor. I looked again, thinking it was a mistake. But table 9 was labeled Catering Overflow. I walked into the kitchen and there it was. A folding table, plastic chairs, and a small white place card. Emily. My breath left me. I took a slow step back, like maybe if I blinked hard enough, it would disappear. A server passed by, avoiding my gaze. I found Josh near the bar and pulled him aside. "What is this?" I asked, showing him the card. "Why am I in the kitchen?" He looked uncomfortable. Mike said it made more sense. "You're coordinating stuff, right?" He figured you'd want to be near the team. "So I don't get a real seat?" I asked, my voice shaking. "I'm his sister, Josh." "It's not personal," he said. "We just had to make room." "It feels personal," I said, stepping back. "I gave you this venue. I gave you everything. He didn't answer. I stood in that kitchen, heart pounding, listening to the laughter and music echo from the ballroom. I watched Ellie glide down the aisle through the monitor screen we used for security. And something in me broke. I wasn't part of this celebration. I was the help. The help with a clipboard and a beautiful dress and a family that had always treated me like an outsider. I walked to my car, opened the glove compartment, and pulled out the signed contract, the one that stated, in clear legalese, that Everglow Events retained the right to revoke services in the event of breach of agreement or mistreatment of staff. They hadn't just mistreated a staff member. They'd humiliated their sister. And I still had time to pull the power. But first, I needed to decide, would I finally stand up for myself or let them push me out once again? I looked up at the estate, perfectly lit against the evening sky. Then down at the document in my hands. The decision had never felt clearer. I didn't leave right away. I sat in the car for a long time, the document resting on my lap, headlights off, phone buzzing occasionally with notifications from the event group chat, texts about lighting cues, cake timing, the DJ's arrival. All business. No one asking where I was, no one noticing I'd disappeared. I watched guests in tuxedos and gowns float past the front entrance, laughing beneath the fairy lights I had personally approved. The music thumped through the walls of my car, distant but smug, like a cruel reminder that I was outside. Unseen. Unwanted. I should have been inside. At table 2 with my uncles and aunts. Toasting with champagne. Celebrating my brother. Instead, I was here, heart pulsing with a cocktail of rage and rejection. It wasn't just about the kitchen table. It wasn't even about the contract. It was the culmination of years, no, decades of being brushed aside. The forgotten birthday. The missed dance recitals. The report cards no one asked about. When Michael got into his first choice college, Mom threw a barbecue for 50. When I graduated top of my class, she mailed a card that said, "Proud of you, sorry, I can't be there." She was in Florida, visiting an old friend. When Josh broke his wrist in 8th grade, he got a signed cast and a week of homemade pancakes. When I broke my ankle during a charity marathon last year, I drove myself to the ER and paid the bill out of pocket. No calls, no visits. And I kept telling myself it didn't matter. That I was strong, independent, self-made. I had a 7-figure business and staff who respected me. But the truth is, family isn't something you can replace with success. I didn't want their validation for the money or the status. I just wanted to be seen. To be accepted, not for what I could do for them, but for who I was. Their sister, their blood. I replayed the conversation with Josh in my head 100 times. His avoidance, his stammering excuses, the way he glanced over my shoulder like he couldn't wait to be somewhere else. I remembered Mom brushing me off like I was a fussy child. Ellie's disdainful expression when I offered to help with the slideshow. And Michael never once looked me in the eye when I tried to discuss how I could contribute meaningfully. He always acted like he was humoring me. Like my presence was optional. An extra accessory to be moved out of the frame when it didn't match the color scheme. I went through with the wedding, of course. I didn't pull the contract. Not yet. I convinced myself to be the bigger person again. I returned inside with my head high and took my assigned places at that folding kitchen table next to a pair of confused junior servers who offered me lukewarm water and whispered apologies. I smiled at them and told them it wasn't their fault, because it wasn't. And I wasn't going to make this about me, not in front of strangers. But as I sat there, listening to the muffled toasts and the sound of cutlery clinking against fine china, I realized that my absence from that room didn't make anyone blink. Not a single person came looking for me. Not Michael. Not my mother. Not even Josh. It was like I had quietly dissolved. And the longer I sat in that chair, the more it dawned on me not only had they excluded me, but they hadn't even considered that I might be hurt by it. Because to them, I wasn't someone who could be hurt, I was the fixer. The background support. The one who showed up, did the work, and stepped aside. My phone buzzed again. A message from my lead coordinator. Everything running smoothly. Let me know if anything needs adjusting. Great job. I read it 3 times, blinking back the tears that had started to form. Great job. I had done a great job. They got everything they wanted. The flowers were on time, the guests were happy. The schedule went off without a hitch. But I was breaking. That night, after the sparkler send-off, I lingered behind. My team had already begun cleanup. I wandered the ballroom alone, heels in hand, toes sore, my dress slightly stained from a spilled wine glass. The centerpieces were still glowing, the candles flickering low. I stared at the sweetheart table where Ellie and Michael had sat, radiant and adored, surrounded by applause. I'd built that stage. Not metaphorically. I had literally designed and ordered the stage's custom backdrop. And no one had seen me. I went home alone. No messages, no thank yous, not even a post on Instagram acknowledging my company's work. Ellie posted 10 stories thanking her makeup artist, florist, and her dog's groomer. Not a word about Everglow, not a word about me. The next morning, I woke up numb. I didn't cry, I didn't scream. I opened my laptop and reread the contract. Highlighted sections, reviewed clauses. I checked emails, invoices, and staff memos. Everything in order. Everything documented. Then I pulled up an old text thread with Mikkel, the one where he asked me to hold the estate for him and promised, "You'll still make your margin, of course." He hadn't even signed a formal agreement at first. I had to chase down the signed contract 2 months later. I scrolled further. The last message I sent, the day before the wedding. Need final confirmation on the guest list to set table placements. No reply. I closed the laptop. For the first time in my life, I wasn't just hurt. I was done. And I was going to make them see me whether they liked it or not. The days after the wedding were oddly quiet. I expected at least a message from Michael or my mother, something simple like, "Thanks for everything," or, "You really pulled it off." But there was nothing. No email, no text, not even a tag on social media. It was like my presence, my contribution, had been completely scrubbed from the narrative. Everglow's Instagram was full of photos from the event candidates, drone shots, time-lapse videos of the setup, all of it posted with pride by my team. But when I looked at Ellie's profile, or even Michael's, you would have thought it was some luxury brand that waved a wand and made the night happen. They tagged the florist, the DJ, the bridal boutique, even the calligrapher who hand-wrote the seating cards. But me? The person who had orchestrated every moving piece from day one. Not even a passing mention. Not even a story repost. I called my mother the next weekend. I told myself it was just to check in, but deep down, I needed something: acknowledgement, recognition, anything to remind me I was still part of them. She answered after the 3rd ring. "Oh, hi, sweetie," she said, distracted, like she was folding laundry. Just getting the house back together. The wedding was such a whirlwind. I forced a laugh. Yeah, it was. Looked beautiful, didn't it? She said. Ellie did a wonderful job with the aesthetic. So elegant. Just like she always wanted. I paused, hearing my heart thud. "I helped with that, Mom." "Yes, of course, dear," she replied quickly. "You were very helpful. Thank you again for lending your staff." Lending. Like I'd dropped off a few chairs. "I wasn't lending," I said, a little sharper. "It was my venue. My company. I covered over 70% of that wedding's logistics." Silence. Then, "Well, you always liked staying busy. You do these things so naturally." I swallowed hard. "I just thought I might hear something from Michael. Or you. Maybe a thank you." She sighed, and I imagined her rubbing her temples. "Emily, must you always make things about you? It was your brother's day." I didn't reply. I just ended the call, gently, and sat with my phone in my lap. The words sank in deeper than I wanted to admit. It was your brother's day. And somehow, that meant I wasn't allowed to feel anything. Not disappointment. Not hurt. Certainly not pride in what I'd accomplished. Nomi Place was behind the curtain, pulling strings in silence. Always behind, never center. Just support. But the wedding wasn't the only injustice. 3 weeks later, I got wind of something else, something that twisted the knife. A longtime vendor of mine, one I had personally introduced to the family during planning, emailed me with a curious update. "Hi Emily," it began. "Just wanted to confirm if you're still involved with the new Brentwood project. Got an inquiry from your brother, Mikkel. He said he's taking over all venue partnerships moving forward and that Everglow's not in the picture anymore. Didn't want to step on any toes." I stared at the screen. The Brentwood project was mine. A joint venture I had been negotiating with a hotel chain for a boutique event series. Michael knew that. I'd mentioned it during dinner once, and he asked about the margins. I hadn't thought much of it at the time, now it made sense. I called him immediately. He answered like nothing was wrong. "Hey what's up?" "Don't hey on me," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Why are you telling vendors that you're taking over Brentwood?" He paused. "Oh, that. Yeah, I was just testing the waters. I figured it might be better for everyone if the family handled things directly." "You've got your hands full." "Better for who?" I snapped. "You have no authority over that deal. It's my contract. My client. You have nothing to do with Everglow." "Come on," he said, voice hardening. "You've always kept your business close to the chest. Thought maybe it was time to make it more collaborative." "Collaborative?" I laughed, cold. "Michael, you tried to steal my client. You told them I was out of the picture." "That's not what I said." "That's exactly what you said. You're undercutting me." "I was helping," he said, defensive now. "Jesus, why do you always think everyone's against you?" "Because you are," I wanted to scream. But I didn't. I just hung up again, this time with my hands shaking. The next day, I called my attorney. I didn't move forward with legal action yet, but I had him send a cease and desist to Michael regarding the Brentwood client. It was a warning shot, but a necessary one. I needed to draw a line. And yet, even after doing everything by the book, the fallout wasn't quiet. I started hearing whispers through the family grapevine. That I was getting aggressive, that I overreacted. My Aunt Elaine called me out of nowhere to say, "You know, sweetheart, this stuff with Michael's tearing the family up. Maybe you two should talk it out instead of bringing lawyers into it." I wanted to ask her where she was when I was eating chicken skewers with the waitstaff at the wedding. I wanted to ask why, when a man defends his business, he's assertive, but when a woman does it, she's aggressive. But I didn't. I thanked her for her concern and ended the call before the tears could reach my voice. It was clear now I wasn't just being excluded. I was being erased. Replaced. Bit by bit, they were cutting me out of every space I had built, every contribution I had made. And the more I tried to speak up, the more they painted me as the problem. The angry one. The difficult sister. It wasn't just about being forgotten anymore. It was about being deliberately shut out. And I knew then that if I didn't start fighting back, they'd keep pushing until I was nothing but a footnote in their family's story. The one who helped. The one who gave. The one who disappeared. But I wasn't going anywhere. The morning after I received Aunt Elaine's call, I sat in my office staring at a blank whiteboard. My team had just finished a successful run of 3 high-profile events, and the usual celebration buzz lingered in the air. But inside me, everything was quiet, heavy, stale. It felt like no matter how much I achieved, my family's indifference drowned it all out. I had built Everglow from nothing, yet I was still that girl in the kitchen, the afterthought. I leaned forward, uncapped a blue marker, and wrote one word across the top of the board in large block letters. Respect. I looked at it for a long time. That's what it came down to. Not fame, not approval, not even love, just basic respect. And if they weren't going to give it to me out of decency, then maybe they'd give it when they had no choice. So I shifted gears. I made a decision to stop operating in the shadows. First, I rewrote Everglow's promotional material. We no longer offered family discounts or informal packages. Every client, family or not, would receive a formal proposal, a detailed contract, and payment terms with zero exceptions. I notified every vendor and staff member. No favors, no back channels, no, it's just her brother. We're a business, we act like one. Then I decided to show up. To be seen. At our next family gathering, a 4th of July cookout at my parents' place, I arrived in a red tailored jumpsuit, heels clicking against the pavement, and brought my own bottle of wine, something rare and expensive. When I walked in, the conversations paused for a moment. "Wow," said Josh, eyebrows raised. "Somebody looks like a CEO." "That's because I am," I said, smiling, and handed the wine to Ellie, who stared at the label like it might bite her. "From our latest gala. French vintage. Thought you'd appreciate it." The day moved slowly, full of awkward pauses and forced laughter. At one point, I saw Michael scrolling through his phone, and when he caught me watching, he said, "You know, we've been thinking about doing some events ourselves." Ellie's got a great eye for decor. I sipped my drink and replied, "Then she better hire a great team, because planning events is more than picking centerpieces." He smirked like he didn't hear me. But I noticed how he flinched when I mentioned we'd just secured a partnership with a luxury resort chain, a deal that had come through a contact Michael once tried to poach from me. That night, after everyone left, Mom pulled me aside. "Emily," she said, "I know there's tension. But must you always make everything about business?" I smiled. "No, Mom. I make it about boundaries." From then on, I stopped asking to be included. I started taking space instead. I hosted a charity fundraiser for children's mental health in August, and instead of just inviting the family, I gave each of them specific roles with public visibility. Josh introduced the keynote speaker, Michael ran the auction paddle raise, and Ellie managed guest check-in. It wasn't out of kindness, it was strategy. I made them see what I could do, what I had built, and for a moment, they saw it. The event was flawless, the press coverage glowing, and at the end of the night, Michael clapped me on the shoulder and said, "I didn't realize this was the level you operated at." I raised an eyebrow. It always has been. But of course, old patterns run deep. A week later, I saw that Michael and Ellie had used my photographer from the fundraiser for free without telling me, passing him off as their own contact for a corporate event. When I confronted the photographer, he said, "Oh, they said you referred me." I didn't. I was furious. Not just at them, but at myself. I was still trying to win respect through service. Still making things easy for them. So I drew another line. I reached out to every vendor and contractor I had ever referred to the family and told them, clearly and in writing, that moving forward, any business related to my network had to go through me. I called it a protection clause, a term I made up to give it weight. I didn't care how it sounded. I was done being the open door. The next test came sooner than expected. Ellie reached out by text. "Ellie. Hey, can I get the contact for that florist from your fundraiser? Need them for a friend's baby shower. XO." I stared at the message for a moment. Then typed. Me. "Hi Ellie. Glad you liked the arrangements. I'd be happy to coordinate the booking through Everglow. Let me know your date, and we'll send over a proposal." 10 minutes later, she replied. "Ellie. Oh. Was just hoping for an intro. Thought you'd be chill about it." I didn't respond. Later that night, Josh called me. "Why are you being so formal with Ellie?" he asked, half laughing. "It's not like she's a stranger," I said calmly. "Because I'm not a stranger either, and I'm tired of being treated like one." He was quiet for a moment. Then said, "You've changed." "No," I replied. "I'm just finally acting like I matter." I wasn't perfect. Some nights, I lay in bed wondering if I was being too harsh. If I should just let it go, be the peacekeeper again, make it easier for everyone. But those thoughts didn't last long anymore. Not after what they'd done, not after how easily they discarded me. Instead, I poured myself into the business. We launched a new mentorship program for young women in event planning, expanded into destination weddings, and signed an exclusive deal with a venue in Italy. My calendar filled, my name gained weight. And still, my phone remained silent from my family unless they needed something. But I stopped waiting for them to come around. I stopped hoping they'd apologize. I focused on building something undeniable. Because even if they never gave me their recognition, I was determined to build a legacy they couldn't ignore. And soon, they'd have no choice but to face everything they tried to bury. Starting with the wedding. And that contract. It didn't take long for the family to react to my new boundaries. In fact, it began with a single group text, initiated by my mother, in that classic tone she always used when pretending to be neutral while clearly blaming me. Family dinner at our place, Sunday 6 p.m. Need to talk some things through. Everyone please be civil. Civil. That word did something to me. It set my teeth on edge because it always came after I'd said something true that made people uncomfortable. I replied, "Sure, I'll be there," and stared at the screen long after the typing bubbles disappeared. I knew what this would be. A family ambush disguised as a conversation. Still, I went. Not to defend myself, but to see if anyone would finally say the things I'd been screaming in silence for years. That Sunday, I wore all black not for drama, but for clarity. It made me feel grounded, strong, unshakable. When I walked into my parents' house, everyone was already there. Michael and Ellie were on the couch, Ellie glued to her phone, Michael pretending to scroll but clearly watching me. Josh stood by the kitchen island, arms crossed. Mom was at the head of the table, wine glass in hand, looking weary in that performative way she always used when she wanted people to feel bad for her without her saying a word. Dad wasn't there. He rarely was for the serious talk. She'd either be in the garage or the den, pretending to be asleep. "Emily," Mom said, gesturing to the seat next to her. "Sit, let's all just be calm." I sat down, spine straight, waiting. For a few seconds, no one spoke. Then Michael leaned forward, elbows on knees. "Look, I'm just gonna say it. This whole thing with the vendors, and the contract drama, and the messages you've been sending, what are you doing? You're making things tense for everyone." I looked at him, unimpressed. "You mean the boundaries I'm setting?" He threw up his hands. "Call it what you want, but you've been hostile. You're treating us like clients instead of family." "That's because you only treat me like family when you need something," I said calmly. Ellie rolled her eyes. "God, here we go again." "No," I continued, eyes locked on Michael. "You made a business decision to exclude me from my own work. You used my resources without acknowledgement. You sat me next to a trash can at your wedding, and then tried to steal a client. And now that I've decided not to play along, I'm the problem?" Josh interjected, trying to play peacemaker as always. "Nobody's saying you're the problem. We just think you're taking this too far. It's not like we did any of this to hurt you." "You didn't have to do it to hurt me," I said. "You just didn't care if it did." My mother sighed, setting down her glass. "Emily, we appreciate what you do, truly. But you've always been a little intense. You don't let things go." "Because I don't let myself be walked over anymore," I said. "That's not intensity, that's self-respect." End of 2. The tension in the room was thick. Ellie laughed bitterly. "You act like we all owe you something just because you run a party company. Newsflash, Emmett's not that deep." I turned to her slowly. "Say that again." "It's not that deep," she repeated, arms crossed, smug. "You threw a fancy wedding. Congrats. But this martyr complex? Exhausting." My hands clenched beneath the table. I could feel my heart pounding in my ears. "You're right," I said quietly. "It's not deep, it's shallow. Like being married to someone who can't see beyond their own reflection." Michael stood abruptly. "Enough. Don't talk to my wife like that." I stood too, matching his tone. "Then maybe your wife shouldn't talk to me like I'm disposable." Mom slammed her hand down. "Stop it, all of you. This is exactly why I didn't want to have this conversation. You're tearing the family apart." "No, Mom," I said, voice rising. "This family was already torn. You just didn't notice because I was the one bleeding quietly while everyone else kept smiling for pictures." There was a stunned silence after that. Josh looked away. Michael's jaw was tight. Ellie muttered something under her breath. And my mother, she finally looked at me. Really looked. And for the first time, I saw something like guilt flicker in her eyes. Not enough. But it was there. "I'm not here to be forgiven," I said, softer now. "I'm here because I'm done begging for a seat at a table I helped build. I've spent my whole life trying to be useful enough to be loved, and I'm done." With that, I walked out. No one stopped me. No one called my name. I got into my car, closed the door, and exhaled so deeply it felt like I was breathing for the first time in months. That night, I reviewed the contract again. The clause about mistreatment was clear. And I had the receipts, text messages, emails, pictures, payment delays. Everything. But I didn't go to war yet. Not that night. I needed something more than legal leverage. I needed to show them that I wasn't afraid anymore. That their silence, their dismissal, their denial, it didn't control me. Because the next time I confronted them, it wouldn't be in their dining room. It would be in a room with lawyers, signatures, and consequences. The following week was a blur. I showed up at the office every day like I always did, hair pinned, heels sharp, blazer buttoned tight, but something inside me had gone quiet. I wasn't angry anymore. Not exactly. It was something colder than anger, something heavier. I walked through the glass doors of Everglow like I was moving underwater, smiling when I had to, nodding through meetings, but I barely heard the words around me. I signed papers without reading them. I approved floral layouts without glancing at the palettes. My assistant, Megan, noticed first. "You okay?" she asked gently one morning as I stood staring at the coffee machine like it might suddenly speak to me. I blinked. "Yeah," I said. "Just tired." She didn't believe me. But she didn't press either. That night, I went home to my quiet apartment and sat on the floor of my living room with a glass of wine I didn't really want. No music. No television. Just the ticking of the wall clock and the occasional car passing outside. I scrolled through photos on my phone, not looking for anything, just moving through old memories like a ghost. There were pictures from the early Everglow days, me hauling crates, laughing with staff, testing lights. I kept going. A picture of Michael and me at a beach barbecue, years ago, before Ellie. He had his arm around my shoulder, both of us sunburned and grinning. I barely recognized us. Further down was a screenshot of my 30th birthday cake on a conference table, staff singing, no family in sight. And finally, the most recent ones, the wedding. Glowing chandeliers. The sweetheart table. Ellie in her designer gown. Michael smiling like he belonged to a world I'd never be part of. I stared at one picture of the ballroom, perfectly lit and packed with guests. I zoomed into the background until I found myself blurry, standing near the kitchen door, clipboard in hand, almost invisible. That was the moment it hit me, hard and fast. Not the disappointment. Not the rage. But the grief. A tidal wave of grief so sudden I had to put the phone down. I curled forward, head in my hands, and let it rise. I cried. Not the kind of tears that slip quietly down your face. These were ugly, full-body sobs. I cried for the girl, who always brought straight A's to the dinner table and was told to stop bragging. I cried for the teenager who learned how to fix her own flat tire because no one ever came when she called. I cried for the woman who built something extraordinary just to be taken for granted by the people she built it for. I cried until my throat hurt and my chest ached and my face was soaked. And when it was over, I lay flat on the carpet, staring at the ceiling, feeling emptier than I ever had. I didn't want revenge. I didn't want power. I just wanted someone to care. Someone to ask me if I was okay and mean it. Someone to notice when I disappeared, but they didn't, and they wouldn't. And the loneliest part of all was knowing that no matter how much I did, how much I gave, how much I built, they would never see me as theirs. Not really. I was too different, too driven, too inconvenient. The next few days passed in a fog. I canceled plans, avoided calls. I didn't even tell anyone when Everglow got nominated for a national event award. Normally, I would have posted it, shared it, let my staff celebrate, but I didn't. Because what was the point of building an empire if there was no one to come home to? No one to say, "I'm proud of you." No one to share the win. I tried calling Dad, just to hear his voice. He picked up on the third ring, sounded groggy. "Hey," he said. "Everything all right?" "Yeah," I lied. "Just wondering how you're doing." He paused. "Same old. Your mom says there's tension again." I almost laughed. "You could call it that." He didn't say anything for a while, then added, "You know how your mother gets. You're too much alike. Both stubborn." That word stubborn landed like a slap. "I'm not calling to be analyzed, Dad. I just wanted to talk." He sighed. "I'm tired, kiddo. Let's talk another time, okay?" And then he hung up. I sat there holding the phone like it might apologize. It didn't, nothing did. The lowest point came 2 nights later. I opened the Everglow inbox and saw a new client inquiry. A massive one. A destination wedding in Greece. Celebrity client. Huge budget. My dream gig. But when I read the client's name, my stomach turned. The referral line at the bottom said, "Referred by Ellie Morgan." I stared at it, heart sinking, then clicked into the details. It was real. Legit. And it came from the woman who hadn't said my name once at her own wedding. Who had watched me be humiliated and said nothing. And now she was using my reputation to gain clout. I closed the laptop and sat in the dark for a long time. That was my rock bottom. Not the betrayal. Not the wedding. Not even the fake smiles around the dinner table. No, it was that moment, sitting in the dark, realizing that no matter how hard I tried to pull away, they would always find a way to reach back in and take more. And I was letting them. Because part of me still wanted to be accepted. Still wanted to be part of them. Still believed that if I just did one more thing, gave one more sacrifice, they might finally look at me and say, "We're proud." But that moment broke that last sliver of hope. And once that hope was gone, something else took its place. Something sharper, clearer. Not rage, not vengeance. Resolve. I stood up, wiped my face, and walked to my desk. I opened the contract, the original Everglow wedding agreement, and began compiling every clause, every breach, every documented slight. I copied emails, saved screenshots, created a timeline. I wasn't doing this to hurt them. I was doing it because I refused to disappear. And when I was done, I closed the folder, set it aside, and whispered to no one, "It's time." The day everything shifted began like any other. A cool Thursday morning, sky smeared with pale clouds, coffee too strong. I was reviewing contracts for an upcoming charity gala when Megan knocked on my office door. She looked cautious, one brow arched. "You'll want to see this," she said, setting her tablet down in front of me. I leaned forward. There it was, an email forwarded from one of our preferred vendors. The subject line: "Urgent request for internal rate breakdown." I frowned. The body of the email was a forwarded thread between Michael and the vendor. He had been asking detailed questions about Everglow's pricing structure. "If you can share a list of what Emily actually charges clients versus what she bills vendors, we're building our own model," Michael had written. And beneath that, even more disturbing, "We'd like to mirror some of Everglow's service tiers but present them under our own brand, completely independent." Independent. The air drained from the room. He wasn't just meddling. He was planning to copy my business. Not borrow. Not collaborate, copy, rebrand. And erase me. Rage crawled up my spine like ice water. But underneath the rage was something else: clarity. It wasn't just about the wedding anymore. Or the table in the kitchen. Or the years of being overlooked. Michael had been studying me, studying Everglow, waiting for a chance to extract the parts he wanted and discard me like scaffolding after construction. I asked Megan, How long has this been going on? She hesitated. I dug through the thread. Looks like about 2 months. He's already approached 3 vendors. One of them signed an NDA. I felt my chest tighten. An NDA. That meant intent. That meant money. That meant strategy. He's trying to launch a shadow version of Everglow, I whispered. And he's using my connections to do it. Megan nodded, grim. He's building something called Lumira Events. Just filed for a trademark last week. I stared at the word Lumira. Elegant, clean, modern. Of course he picked something that sounded like light. Like Everglow's sister company. He didn't even try to be subtle. The betrayal hit me in waves. Not just the professional insult, but the personal rupture it confirmed. Michael hadn't just failed to appreciate me, actively sought to replace me. To profit off me. To become me, without the parts that made me difficult, emotional, too ambitious. He wanted the fruits of my labor, stripped of my presence. I stood up. Get me my lawyer, I said, and pull the contract from the wedding. We're moving forward. The next 48 hours were a whirlwind. My attorney, Nadine, a fire-eyed woman with the calm of a surgeon and the instincts of a wolf, met me in my office that Friday evening. We sat in the conference room as I slid a thick binder across the table. Every breach, I said. Every time they used our resources and failed to acknowledge or compensate, including the misuse of vendor contracts, the misrepresentation of referrals, and personal slander regarding my professionalism. Nadine flipped through the binder in silence, nodding. This is airtight. You have them cornered. Good, I said. Because I'm done being polite. She leaned back. How do you want to handle this? We can send a cease and desist with threat of damages. We can sue for breach of contract. Or, we can make it public. That stopped me. Public? She smiled slightly. You've built Everglow to be a brand. A visible, respected brand. You could tell your story. Use it. Own the narrative. I sat with that idea. Not for revenge, not to humiliate, but to reclaim the version of me they'd buried. The woman who had built something without shortcuts. Who had endured dismissal, isolation, and still kept showing up. Maybe it was time people saw not just the glitter of Everglow, but the grit behind it. That night, I didn't sleep. I wrote instead. A letter, an open statement. Personal but professional. I told the story, my story. The wedding, the exclusion, the manipulation, the quiet theft. I didn't name names. I didn't need to. I wrote about what it means to be the backbone of a family that never turned around to acknowledge the support. About what it's like to create beauty for people who resent the hands that built it. I finished it just before dawn. And I sent it to Nadine. Monday morning, the letter went live on Everglow's official blog and LinkedIn. Megan pushed it to our email list. Industry groups picked it up within hours. By noon, it had been shared over 1,000 times. Messages flooded in, women from across the country, business owners, planners, designers. This is my story too, many wrote. Thank you for saying it. I've worked with family who used me and threw me aside. This gave me strength. It didn't take long before the ripple hit home. Michael called that evening. I didn't answer. Then a message. What the hell is this? You're blowing this way out of proportion. Another. Take it down, Em. You're being dramatic. And finally. You want a war? Fine. I read those messages with a calm I hadn't felt in months. Because here was the truth laid bare. He'd never seen me as an equal. Only as a resource, a utility. But now, he was panicking. Because I had taken back the one thing he thought I'd never use, me voice. I forwarded the texts to Nadine and said, include these in the next filing. Then I stood up, walked to the mirror in my office, and looked at myself. Really looked. The woman staring back wasn't cold or broken. She was steady. She had lost so much, but not herself. That was the twist. Not just the revelation about Michael, not just the contract. The real twist was that I had finally stopped begging to be seen and had started seeing myself. And I wasn't going to disappear again. It was a Tuesday afternoon when I received the summons. Not from a court, not from a lawyer. Michael had requested a face-to-face meeting. The message was cold, clinical. We need to talk. In person. No lawyers. He even included the address, a private co-working space he occasionally used for his real estate ventures. At first, I considered ignoring him. I had nothing left to say that hadn't already been said through contracts, letters, or silence. But a part of me, the one that needed closure more than vengeance, agreed. Not for his sake, for mine. I needed to look him in the eye and say everything I'd swallowed over a lifetime of quiet betrayal. I arrived early, wearing a navy blazer over a steel gray dress, heels firm, hair sharp. He was already inside when I walked in, pacing near a small conference table cluttered with papers, his phone face down beside him. He turned when he saw me, face tense, lips pressed in a tight line. "Emily." "Michael," I said, and closed the door behind me. We sat in silence for a moment. Then he leaned forward, fingers steepled. "You really had to go public." I tilted my head. "You really had to build a knockoff of my company?" His jaw twitched. "This isn't how we handle things. You've embarrassed the family." I laughed, quiet and bitter. I told the truth. The family embarrassed themselves when they treated me like hired help at your wedding. "That again?" he snapped. "Are you seriously still clinging to where you were seated?" "No," I said. "I'm clinging to years of being sidelined, dismissed, and disrespected. The wedding was just the final insult." Ugh. He stood up, walked to the window, exhaled hard. "Look, I didn't mean for things to get like this," Ellie thought. "Stop," I cut in. "Don't hide behind Ellie. You're the one who filed a trademark for a business model you stole from me. You're the one who tried to woo my vendors. You're the one who tried to replace me with a version you could control." He turned, defensive. "It's not like that. Isn't it?" I opened my bag and slid a folder across the table. "Here, all your communications with vendors, all your proposals mimicking my tears, all your messages suggesting I was no longer involved. This isn't interpretation, this is evidence." He didn't open it, just stared at it like it might explode. "You were never supposed to see that," he muttered. I stood. "But I did, and I'm not pretending anymore. I'm not shrinking anymore. You wanted my business without me. You wanted my work without my presence. That ends today." His voice rose, desperate now. "You always think you're the victim. Ever since we were kids, it's always been Emily against the world. Maybe if you weren't so intense, so impossible to talk to, I was impossible to ignore," I said. "And you hated that. You and Mom and everyone else who only liked me when I was silent and useful." His expression shifted, anger folding into something close to guilt. "Mom didn't mean to." "Yes, she did. She made me believe love was something you had to earn by giving and giving until there was nothing left." I stepped closer. "But I've stopped giving. Now I take my space, I take my credit, I take my voice back." He sat down heavily, rubbing his temples. "You really think you're so righteous? Like you've never done anything wrong?" "I think I've done everything I could to keep this family together, and I got used until I had nothing left." I leaned forward, lowering my voice. "And here's what's going to happen. You're going to dissolve Lumira. You're going to send a written apology to every vendor you misled. And you're going to publicly acknowledge Everglow's role in your wedding. Or I sue. Not just for breach of contract, but for defamation, professional interference, and intellectual theft. Your choice." He stared at me, mouth slightly open, stunned. "You'd really do that?" "I already have everything prepped," I said. "This isn't a threat, it's a courtesy." He looked away, jaw tight, and for the first time in my life, I saw it fear. Not of me, exactly, but of what I represented. A woman he could no longer control. A sister he couldn't silence. The door opened behind me. Ellie stepped in, having clearly been listening from outside. "She's not bluffing," she said quietly. "I read her letter. Everyone has. You have no idea how many people admire her for finally speaking up. Michael's head snapped toward her. You read it? Of course I did, she said. And honestly, I wish I'd treated her better too. That moment was the final twist. Not the apology. Not the lawsuit. But the shift. For once, the truth was in the open, and no one could twist it. Michael didn't speak again. He just nodded slowly, the fight draining from him. As I walked out of the room, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt free. And that was all I ever really wanted. The week after that final confrontation, everything moved fast. Michael followed through at first reluctantly, but quickly enough once Nadine issued the official intent to litigate letter. He signed a dissolution agreement for Lumira Events. We drafted a joint statement, professionally worded, explaining that Everglow and Lumira had reached a mutual agreement and that all references to Everglow's proprietary services would be removed from Lumira's filings. That was the public version. The private one was less graceful. Michael avoided my calls, and when he did respond, his messages were curt and businesslike. Documents submitted. Vendor letters sent. Final draft approved. No apology, no ownership. But I didn't need it anymore. What I did need and what came next was unexpected. The letter I had published kept gaining traction. Event planning forums, small business groups, even entrepreneurial podcasts started sharing it as an example of how to navigate family and business boundaries. One blog titled it, How to Reclaim Your Narrative in a World That Wants You Quiet. I was invited to speak at a women's leadership summit in Atlanta. During the panel, a woman in the audience asked me, "Do you think your family ever really saw you?" I thought for a second and said, "Number." But now they see what they lost when they tried to silence me. And that truth had weight. Because slowly, the consequences began to ripple back home. Josh called first. "Hey," he said awkwardly, like he wasn't sure I'd even pick up. I wanted to talk. Not about business, just as your brother." I let the silence stretch for a moment before answering. "All right, talk." He exhaled. "I didn't realize how deep it went. I just thought you were overreacting. But after everything came out what Michael did, what Mom ignored, I get it now. You weren't making it up." "No," I said flatly. "I never was." "You deserved better," he said, quiet. "And I'm sorry I didn't stand up for you sooner." I didn't offer a forgiveness he hadn't earned, but I said, "Thank you, that matters." Next came Ellie. She messaged me privately. "I know I've been awful. I treated you like a vendor, not a sister. I let the wedding swallow me. I let Michael turn your generosity into a power play. I don't expect you to forgive me. But I see it now. I see what we did." I stared at the message for a long time before replying. It's not about seeing. It's about doing. Acknowledge it. Change it. That's the only apology that matters. Then came the biggest shift of all. An email from my mother. Subject line, "If you'll read this." I opened it with cautious hands. "Emily," it began. "I don't know where to begin. I've read your letter. I've spoken to Michael. I've had to face some ugly truths about how I've treated you. I thought I was being fair. I thought I was helping you by keeping you grounded, by not feeding what I saw as ego. But all I did was chip away at your worth. You were never a burden. You were a light I was too tired to look at, and you deserved more than my tolerance. You deserved my admiration. I'm so sorry. I know words can't fix it, but I'm ready to listen now. If you'll let me." It wasn't perfect. It didn't erase the years. But it was a start. And for the first time, I didn't cry from pain. I cried from something closer to relief. I didn't respond immediately. I waited. Let the letter sit, let it breathe. In the meantime, Everglow flourished. We expanded into 2 more cities. I hired a director of operations to free myself from day-to-day logistics. I began mentoring young women launching their own planning brands. One afternoon, I stood on the stage at a gala where we were named Event Firm of the Year. The room rose in applause. And this time, no one put me in the back. Later, backstage, Megan pulled me aside. "You know," she said, "the fact that they tried to erase you just proves how much they feared what you could do." I smiled. Now they have to live with what I actually did. And they did. The next family gathering, a small birthday dinner for my dad, felt different. I arrived late on purpose, not out of spite, but clarity. When I walked in, the room quieted. Then Josh raised a glass and said, "To the sister who taught us that boundaries aren't walls, they're windows. We just have to open our eyes." A strange hush followed. Then, slowly, people clinked glasses. My mother stood, walked over, gently took my hand. "Thank you for coming. Thank you for seeing me," I replied. Michael didn't say much that night. But he didn't look away either. And for now, that was enough. Because I had already won. Not just in business. Not just in the courtroom of family opinion. I had taken everything they tried to strip from my voice, my pride, my name, and turned it into something untouchable. Me. The woman who sat in the kitchen during her brother's wedding. And now, the woman who owned the entire house. Life settled into a strange, unexpected peace after everything unfolded. Not the kind of peace that wraps you in warmth, but the kind that feels like silence after a storm, sharp, clean, and just a little too quiet. It wasn't instant, and it didn't come with fanfare. It came in small, steady moments, waking up without the weight of resentment pressing on my chest. Walking into the Everglow office and feeling proud without needing anyone to notice. Hosting events and knowing that every client, every detail, every ounce of brilliance in the room was there because I'd built something real, something that no longer needed anyone's approval to be valid. I stopped looking for validation in group chats that never included me. I stopped watching my family's social media, waiting for a tag, a mention, a scrap of recognition. I started living fully in my own space. My relationship with my family didn't magically repair itself, but something shifted. It was slower with my mother. We had lunch once a month, sometimes less. At first it was stiff, full of polite pauses and careful phrasing. But eventually, she began asking real questions. Not about work, not about who I was dating or whether I was thinking of kids, just, "How are you, really?" And when I answered, she listened. That alone was a small miracle. She still slipped sometimes. Still tried to steer things toward Michael or complained about how everyone's so sensitive these days. But she also apologized when she went too far, and that was new. That was enough for me to try again. Josh and I became closer, surprisingly so. He began stopping by my office unannounced with coffee and jokes, offering to help scout venues or test out event concepts. He told me once, during a late-night cleanup after a New Year's gala, "You're not just my sister anymore. You're the only one in this family who really says what she means." I envy that. I laughed, tired and touched, and said, "You can say what you mean too. It just takes practice." We started calling each other once a week, nothing formal, just check-ins. He was trying. I let him. Even Ellie, guarded and poised as ever, began to thaw. It started with a single text. "I've been thinking about what you said. You were right." I didn't reply right away, didn't know how. But weeks later, we ran into each other at a networking event. She approached me with a genuine smile. "You know, I always thought I had to choose between being liked and being honest. Watching you, you made me question that." It wasn't an apology, not really, but it was something honest. Something unfiltered. And for Ellie, that was rare. We didn't become friends overnight, but we stopped being enemies. We found mutual respect. That was enough. Michael remained the most distant. We'd pass each other at family functions like ships in the night, polite but brittle. He never addressed what he'd done in detail. Maybe he never would, and maybe I didn't need him to anymore. Because the power he once held to shape how I saw myself, to twist my efforts into nuisances, to reduce my presence to something optional was gone. I had taken it back. I had stood in front of him, laid down truth like steel, and walked away taller. There was nothing he could say now that would change the fact that I had won not out of vengeance, but out of clarity. And I think he knew that. Professionally, Everglow entered its most dynamic season yet. We expanded into international markets. Our Italy partnership took off, and we launched our first retreat for women entrepreneurs in Santorini. I was invited to give keynote speeches, sit on panels, mentor young founders. Not because of the scandal, but because people finally saw what I had built and what it took to build it. I spoke often about boundaries, about standing firm even when your voice shakes. One woman told me after a talk, "I left my job after reading your story. I started my own business. You gave me permission to believe in myself." I carried those words with me like armor. In my personal life, I started rediscovering joy, real joy, not the manufactured kind that comes from accomplishments and awards. I took weekends off. I picked up painting again, something I hadn't done since college. I traveled for pleasure, not work. I danced barefoot in my kitchen. I hosted dinners with friends who had become family. Friends who never made me prove I belonged. Friends who pulled up a chair without me asking. I met someone too. Slowly, unexpectedly. A landscape architect who admired my ambition but loved me most when I was just myself, unfiltered, vulnerable, quiet. We took things slow. He never asked me to shrink. He never flinched when I spoke my mind. On our third date, he said, "You carry fire in your chest. That's not something to tame, that's something to protect." I smiled. For once, I believed it. And through all of it, I kept that contract from Michael's wedding in a drawer in my office. Not because I needed it anymore, but because it reminded me of the moment I changed. The moment I stopped waiting for my family to see me and decided I would see myself instead. That was the calm after the storm. Not a perfect calm, but a strong one. A steady one. I had reclaimed my name. My worth. My voice. And now, every time I walk into a roomany room, I don't look for my name on a seat chart. I bring my own chair. Sometimes, when the city gets quiet and the office lights have all gone dark, I sit by my window with a cup of tea and think about that day at the wedding. The clatter of dishes, the hum of the kitchen, the sting of realizing that I, the sister of the groom, had been seated next to a storage shelf while everyone else clinked glasses under chandeliers I had chosen. That moment doesn't hurt the way it used to. It no longer burns or humiliates me. Instead, it reminds me of how far I've come, not just in distance from them, but in clarity, in self-worth, in knowing what I will and will not accept ever again. I think a lot about the roles we play in our families. Some of us are cast as caretakers, others as rebels, the invisible ones, the peacemakers, the punching bags. And too often, we live inside those roles longer than we should, mistaking obligation for identity. I lived in the role of the quiet achiever, the helper, the girl who made herself small enough to keep the peace. And I stayed there far too long because I thought that earning love was better than not having it at all. But love earned through silence isn't love, it's performance. And when I finally stopped performing, when I finally said no, drew my lines, raised my voice, I discovered something shocking. The world didn't end. It opened. If you've ever been told you're too much, too ambitious, too emotional, too strong, let me tell you something that took me years to learn. Your strength is not a flaw. Your voice is not a weapon. It's a gift. And if the people around you are uncomfortable when you use it, that's not your problem to fix. That's their fear trying to keep you in your place. Step out anyway, raise it anyway. Demand your seat, and if they don't offer one, bring your own and sit at the head of the damn table. I used to think that setting boundaries meant pushing people away. Now I know it means making space for the right ones to come closer. It doesn't matter if they're blood. Family isn't just who you share a name with. It's who shows up when you need to be seen. It's who celebrates your wins without shrinking in your shadow. It's who doesn't flinch when you stand in your full power. And sometimes, when the people who share your DNA can't give you that, you build your own family brick by brick, truth by truth, moment by honest moment. The truth is, I don't regret what happened. Not the wedding, not the fight, not the confrontation, not even the pain. Because every time they tried to minimize me, they unknowingly forced me to grow bigger, stronger, louder. And now, when I look in the mirror, I see a woman who knows her worth down to the marrow. I see someone who no longer seeks approval to breathe deeply or speak boldly. I see someone who was once seated in the kitchen and now designs the halls where the real decisions are made. So, if you're their no on the outside, in the back, beside the clutter and the noise, don't stay there because they told you that's where you belong. You don't. You never did. Stand up, walk out, and build the room that was always meant for you. Because you are not small. You never were. You are the storm they didn't see coming. And now, you are the calm they'll never forget.